Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and his selected historical houses within each community. Today's episode, we will be discussing the Ludlow Memorial Park. So, how is the Ludlow Memorial Park arranged?
Alright, it's arranged fairly nicely, so I'll talk about that arrangement and what are some of the buildings that swing around this beautiful park. And we also talk about are there any other war memorials around Ludlow, not in this park, and then compared to other communities. So, Ludlow Memorial Park has inside of it plaques on stones that tell you who from Ludlow died during the course of the various wars that the United States was involved in. Ludlow had men from the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and they are honored in these granite stones. And you might be able to pick out someone you know, or knew, or your family knew, or some relatives, in most cases. And it's quite well done. It's set back enough from the road so that it's somewhat quiet, even though it's a busy street. And it's also in a place that has a lot of nice looking buildings. Physically, they're nice architecturally, and they're important historical buildings too. And we'll talk about those.
And what are some of the buildings that surround the park?
All right, the Ludlow Memorial Park itself from 1910. On the outskirts or perimeter of this park, there's a Stevens Memorial Building from 1906, which is towards the right as you face into the park. There's a Ludlow High School towards the back portion from 1910. That was designed by George Alderman of Holyoke. Towards the left back, there's the Hubbard Library from 1889, which is well worth the trip to go inside, see a nicely designed library. Up the street a bit is the Union Church of Christ. Of course, there's these beautiful memorials inside of here. Now, as we sweep towards the back, what is behind you of this park, well, there's a bridge behind called the Putz Bridge, and the one that's there now is from 1930. And that was the start of what used to be the Ludlow Canal. So that canal was put in the the first portion was put in the 1820s and second portion in the 1840s. And they used to have mills along there. 7 of the mills were on the canal itself, and then 4 more were in the distance, and most of those 4 still exist. And those are mostly towards the right of this park. So the whole arrangement of the park is wonderful because you got all the history in the area, and you have this nice memorial stone right in the middle.
And really quick before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops on each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, @yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So, getting back to our interview, are there other memorials in Ludlow?
Yes, the Civil War memorials and obelisks on a green that's in Ludlow Center near the old Congregational Church area, near the Fuller Cemetery and the old meeting house. And that is where the men who are from Ludlow died during the course of the Civil War are honored. I believe 6 or 7 of the men died in Andersonville Prison in Georgia, and they're on that. And the amount of names, I believe, was 14 or so. So, yes, it's two locations. It's this beautiful memorial park in downtown Ludlow, and there's the Civil War Monument. I wish they had told on the modern one that they weren't going to reproduce those other names, but most people in Ludlow know that it's out there.
And how does this memorial park compare to other communities?
All right, it's fairly well compared to them. It has a complete sense, even though it's split into two different parks. You know, the old-time obelisk out in the green in this modern section. And this section is surrounded by gorgeous buildings which are very historical. So in that sense, this compares extremely well to most other locations. And it's complete outdoors too. Some communities have names indoors and some outdoors. So, you know, this is a fairly good way of doing it. I would say it's definitely above average. It's not as wonderful as a place such as Agawam, which has them all in one location in a big park, but it's pretty good, and so I'm happy they've done it this way, and I encourage you to visit both sites, both the Civil War Monument, which is very old, from the late 1860s, and this modern edition, which is for the more modern burials, and it honors many of the Ludlow occupants, especially since its industrial era started and it became a very big community itself. So please visit both.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts on his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like on the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. This tour will spotlight the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the history of Ludlow, Massachusetts. So, name a few of the key historical locations throughout Ludlow.
Most importantly, Ludlow took itself out of the agricultural era into the industrial era through making the Ludlow Canal System. This was a series of two canals, and it was made by one company only, the Ludlow Manufacturing Company, and they made jute and twine, and they grew and grew enormously so, from 2 mills up to 11 mills. And 4 of those mills are still located there. The rest have been taken down. The canal has been filled in, but if you could attend one of my presentations on the power canals of the Chicopee River, I'll tell you exactly where that canal was. So today we'll talk about not only canals, but also churches and cemeteries around Ludlow, and then how does Ludlow preserve its history and what it does. And I know it does because a few of the canal-based mills have been changed over to residential housing. And that's a work in progress at this point. So they are preserving those looks. One of those mills have a clock in it, which is kind of a symbol of Ludlow, at least in the downtown area. So Ludlow has a lot going for it, and if you look around, it has other unique things. It has a beautiful Hubbard Library, has a beautiful green right downtown, and some of its churches are rather unique looking.
And do any of the cemeteries within Ludlow have any significant imprint on the town's history?
Yes, there's a few of them towards what's called Ludlow Center of Village within Ludlow. There's the Fuller Cemetery, which has a lot of pioneers of Ludlow itself within it. Now, there's one cemetery in Ludlow called Island Pond Cemetery. And there is a section in the front of that cemetery where it has very old stones inside of it. Now, Island Pond Cemetery was made in 1901, so why are you getting all these very old stones? Well, it turns out there used to be another cemetery in Ludlow called the Jenksville Cemetery, also called the Ludlow Village Cemetery. And in 1902, all the bodies, the burials from that cemetery were brought over to Island Pond Cemetery. And that was about 475 burials. And they're all in the front portion of the Island Pond Cemetery. So, it has a modern part in the back 2/3, but its front part is very unique looking. And he did a decent job of arranging them. There's one whole family and a big line of about 18 gravestones, all the same name. So that's one unique thing about the cemeteries of Ludlow. Also, Ludlow just started a brand new cemetery last year called the Reservoir Cemetery. So there's a lot going on in that department.
And real quick before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and posts of stops throughout. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, how have some of the churches around Ludlow influenced their history?
Well, one church that is very nice to visit just because they've done a great job in their landscape is the Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church, which around it they've built up a Station of the Cross area. They've also built in that area an outdoor shrine, which is closed, and they've also put other things around the outdoors. They also maintain a soccer field in the back, and the church itself is very nice looking, both inside and outside. So that's one incredible highlight that would surprise anyone that went to Ludlow. Now, some of the very old churches, of course, are the Protestant churches, and they include the Union Church of Christ, and then the First Church in Ludlow. All right, that one's at 859 Center Street. And those are the two very, very old churches around. They're the typical white painted wooden clad churches. And in the direction of more of the Catholic churches, the St. John the Baptist Church really surprised me by its beautiful look. It's a complete campus too, where it has a rectory, a convent, right? And then the church itself is a beautiful church, a double-towered church with beautiful cupolas on the very top of it. So that one's a beautiful church to walk around and look into its history. All right. Otherwise, there's a lot of smaller churches around, and each of them are worth looking at because of the unique architecture they have.
And how does the town of Ludlow preserve their history?
Okay, they preserve it very well. The area where the mills are, the upper mills, numbered 8, 9, 10, and 11. They have a riverside trail now that goes along with the Chicopee River and next to those 4 upper mills. So that is wonderful. And then the town green is also the Veterans Green. And so they have there monuments to the men from Ludlow that died during the course of any of the wars the United States fought. And the one for the Civil War is the only one that's not there. But that one for the Civil War is on the tiny green out in Ludlow Center, a small village. And there you have the Civil War monument right in the green, and that's surrounded by the cemetery, the Fuller Cemetery. It's near a replica of the First Congregational Church, and it's near the first meeting house of Ludlow itself. So it's a very important cemetery location. Now, Around the area of the Potts Bridge, there's also a lot of old-time Ludlow Manufacturing Company mill worker housing. And some of it's in Ludlow and some of it's in the Indian Orchard section of Springfield. So there's a lot of little things like that if you know what you're looking at, there's very peculiar and very interesting items around. Now, again, the most interesting to me was the canal system, and that's where I think Ludlow is going to come up a little bit short, because it's hard for people to tell where the old-time canals were. And I hope to give a talk at the Hubbard Library this year or next, which will explain the power canals and the old-time mills. And I might even do an outdoor canal tour. The canals aren't there, but some other remnants of both the mills and the canals are still in place, and people might like that. So this could be possible. But I hear that the Ludlow Historical Society is very active, and that's a good sign. And the Hubbard Library, I know, has a lot of archives. So in general, yes, but I wish, of course, it was a little bit more.
Thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can check out a large selection of other podcasts on his website, as well